Hi everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. This episode's amazing guest is Zarina Macha, who's the rational female. You need to check her out on social media, especially her YouTube channel. And about a week ago, I sent her my new book on feminism, and I thought, let's see what this young lady thinks about it. So here she is. So welcome, Zarina, to the show.
Hi there, Nick. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, I did have a read through your book. I didn't read all of it, but I did read a lot of it. And I especially like the fact that you started off with a personal anecdote regarding your experiences as a young man and how, you were a young man who came from a, kind of low income background. And during the 70s, you were seeing these feminists talking about how they are all oppressed when you yourself, as a young male, were struggling, and you were seeing a lot of the young males of your generation struggling a lot. And this is something which I talk about as well, especially at Speaker's Corner, how a lot of the feminists are the most privileged class of women, and they really don't care about the disenfranchised young people, about the impoverished people, and they're really just very unaware of their own privileges.
Yeah, and I talk about in the book, I class it as feminism basically is a trade union for other feminists.
Yeah, no, I remember you saying that in the book. Yeah, and I completely agree. It was really well said.
Because I've sort of that from the 70s, from obviously I was a child in the 70s, and I could see around me, real hardship, men and women struggling. But then on TV, as you were saying, I'm seeing educated, usually white women saying they're being oppressed. Doors are being shut in their faces and they can't do this, they can't do that. And I'm looking at my family where every woman worked because we needed the money. And all the men in my family were doing worse than the women. Most of them doing manual jobs out in the rain, the snow, digging up roads, out of work for periods on time, having relationship breakdown, and then not being able to see their children because some of my family female members then wouldn't let them see their children. Accusations of abuse where I saw no abuse. And I even had one family member, I remember this distinctly as a child. I won't name any of these family members, but I had a female family member tell another female family member, when her ex-husband calls at the house again, open the door, rip open your blouse and start screaming so the neighbours come. And then you can tell the police he attacked you and they'll keep him away from seeing you and seeing his children. And as a 7-year-old, I remember thinking, not only is this disgraceful, but when I'm older, I'm going to be that man. I'm going to be that man that the women turn on and use the law against so he can't see his children. And I remember that conversation.
No, it's absolutely terrible. And you're absolutely right. Women do by default expect the man to step up and provide. And you even mentioned that in your book as well, how as the man, you believe it's your role to protect the women in your life, to stick up for the women in your life. You said something, there was a line I think you said about how you had like multiple stitches or something from where you were like protecting women, or is that correct?
Yes, yeah, I've got 19 stitches in my head through protecting.
Yeah, no, I remember reading that. Yeah.
In an argument she started with other people.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? It's like a lot of women are very unaware of their own privilege. And there's a book that I'm currently reading called The Privileged Sex by Martin van Creveld. And, that book, Is There Anything Good About Men by Roy Baumeister, The Myth of Male Power by Dr. Oren Farrell, which you also, you mentioned Oren Farrell in your own book as well. Effectively what's going on is that a lot of these men, including yourself, are really fed up of feminists effectively completely ignoring all of the risks that men go out of their way to take. And there's a man at Speakers, I'm not sure if you're aware, but yes, I go to Speakers Corner every Sunday and I hold a sign saying feminism is trash. I have been going there now for about 7 months. And there's a man there named Rod. I always mix up his name, but yes, I'm pretty sure his name's Rod. And he always stands there. He said he's been going there for like 8 years, and he has like a sign over his jumper saying Studio Brawl, Janice Fiamenko, who's an excellent professor. I'm sure you know her. Yeah, she's fantastic. I interviewed her back in February on my own channel. And he was talking about the same things as you, effectively, about how it's a lot of the men who are struggling, the working male who is especially if we talk specifically about England as well, the working English male who goes out of his way to protect and provide for his family. And effectively, these feminists are these very, very privileged. And you are right, they are usually white women. And I don't like saying that because I really, really hate the demonization of white people, especially the demonization of the white male. So I always feel very uncomfortable pointing out the fact that most of these feminists are white women. And, it's not me trying to say it to sound racist. I'm just pointing out the facts. And a lot of, women of color say this too, but they're sort of afraid to point out that, yes, there is this very small group of very, very privileged, well-educated, women of a certain ethnic background. And they are the ones who hold most of the power in academia. They're the ones who push, all of these progressivist movements like, to the transgender ideology, this destruction of the family unit. And the problem is that the vast majority of people don't support these ideologies whatsoever. And it's really, really quite strange, really, because most people believe, that a man should be a man, a woman should be a woman. We are different. And I really like the fact you said in your book as well, we are equal but different. Because I've said that. I've actually stopped using the term equality now because I think a lot of people think equality means men and women are the same. So I prefer to use the term complementary, which is a very, very biblical term. Well, I'd say a universally religious term, really. But complementary implies that males and females are effectively, we are different, but we hold complementary values in the sense that the man and the woman are supposed to complement each other. And a lot of people at Speaker's Corner are religious, and a lot of them agree with me on this as well. And effectively, it saddens me how people really seem to have forgotten this, except the irony is most people have not forgotten this. Most people do believe that males and females are different, that we have different roles, and ultimately what keeps society functioning, it's a man and a woman together raising families, and the communities being built around that, really. And I do think as well, like, the nuclear family in itself is a little bit problematic, because I know in some cultures you have the extended family, and in this society it's as if like it all falls on only the man and the woman, when really it should be the extended family. Britain doesn't really seem to have a big community feel anymore, going on a slight tangent, but this is a kind of an issue. I think a lot of people feel this at the moment. And I think that a lot of this does come from feminism, because ultimately, to have the stability of societies and the stabilities of community, you do need to have that male role, that male authoritativeness. And that's really been lost. And I think that the white English male really feels that. I know a lot of, young white English men feel that their country, their homeland, they can't stand up for their land, they can't stand up for their family, they can't stick up for their homeland. And I think it is largely because feminism has ultimately demonized, in Britain especially, the position of the white English male, in the same way that a lot of African American men felt in the 60s, 70s that their role was being demonized. And it all comes from feminism, because a lot of, Black women in America did not support feminism. They were like, no, I want to stand by my man. A lot of them started the womanist movement instead, which had nothing to do with feminism. And ultimately, it's this demonization of the male role, which I think is so dangerous. And ultimately, I think that's what I really liked about your book, and what I really like about a lot of men who speak out against feminism.
Yeah, and I think the biggest trick feminists played on us was to make people think that feminism was basically equality. And if you're anti-feminist, it means you're anti-woman, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Well, absolutely. That's why I call myself a women's advocate, and why I'm trying to push this idea of a non-feminist women's movement. And there's been some men who've said to me, oh, why do we need that? Like, why do women need advocacy? The reason is because if we get rid of feminism, there needs to be something to replace it. Because also my concern is that while obviously there's a big issue with men's rights, men do need their rights. My problem as well is because a lot of men are very angry and fed up, and you have these actual, you could say misogynistic males like the incels and the MGTOWs. And my concern is that what might happen is that men will gain their rights, and then unfortunately some men, especially men from societies that have come to this country who don't really respect the values of this country and who don't really respect necessarily women, they'll suddenly now want to impose this very, very chauvinistic ideal for men. And what I think is needed to balance that out is something good for women that says, yes, we can celebrate womanhood, we can celebrate being, a wife and a mother, we can celebrate women having careers, but we also should not be anti-men. And that's really something which I want to get through to women, because right now it does seem most of the people who support me on YouTube and who support me at Speaker's Corner are men, which is great. But long term, I do want to reach more women. I do think that women deserve something better than feminism. I do think a lot of women would like my idea as well, because, there are, like, I do see women sometimes at Speaker's Corner, they smile at me. Like a lot of women don't support feminism, especially married women, religious women, women who have children, women who have partners. You know, they walk by and they kind of look at their boyfriends, they kind of smile at me because they know it's wrong. And I think women are really being, women who are not feminists really, really have a hard time. There's no one to really speak for non-feminist women. There's no real non-feminist female figurehead at the moment. It's all, you know, we're just bombarded by feminists after feminist, and there's all these different new feminists. It's like some women say, oh, I'm this type of feminist, I'm that type of feminist, and it's like, I don't want your feminism, I don't want it, because it's fundamentally it goes back to that demonization of the male role. And have you noticed as well, feminists will always say we don't hate men, but you know, you rightly identified that Jermaine Greer and Julie Bindel and these other feminists, they never said they wanted equality. They said they wanted to be liberated from the patriarchy. And patriarchy to feminism is symbolically represented by men. And unfortunately, when feminists say we hate the patriarchy, what they really mean is we don't value or appreciate the male role. They view the idea of the man as a symbol of authority, as the man as the head of the house, the man as the head of the church, or the whatever, as effectively being a misogynist, which is so wrong.
Yeah. You just mentioned then different types of feminism, because everybody claims to be a feminist, but a different version of feminism. And in the book, I write down lots of different versions I discovered that I talk about in the book. So let me quickly read you the list. So you're looking at Marxist feminist, socialist feminist, and anarchist feminist, equity feminist, lesbian feminist, cultural feminist, ecological feminist, difference feminist, social feminist, state feminist, intersectional feminist, radical feminist, liberal feminist, eugenics feminist, abolitionist feminist, maternal feminist, new feminist, individual feminist. It's like, what do all those things mean? It's meaningless.
Well, I always, because a lot of people ask me what is feminism, and I came up with quite a, well, it's a long but quite simple definition. So the definition which I propose of feminism is this. Feminism is a social and political ideology that claims that women are an oppressed social class under a patriarchal society and seeks to liberate women through the destruction of gender roles. And I think that's the most simple.
My definition of feminism is this, I'll read it. Feminism is basically a lack of gratitude by a minority of women for all the sacrifices, hard work and danger that men have put themselves through to benefit the lives of everyone in their group, community, country and planet.
Oh, that's a nice definition. I think your definition sort of describes the effect of feminism on society, which is effectively true. And that's exactly right. Feminism doesn't value or appreciate the male role. It doesn't value or appreciate the sacrifices. I wanted to sort of give like a more of an academic definition because, yes, effectively, people think it's so dangerous. A lot of young women say, oh, I'm a feminist because feminism means equality. And it's so dangerous. They don't really understand. They haven't done the research. You know, like, for example, if you just simply read The Feminine Mystique, I think any woman who thinks she's a feminist should read The Feminine Mystique. It's very, very clear. Friedan was pretty much, I mean, she called the marriage a comfortable concentration camp. It's pretty clear that she was very anti-marriage, and really what she was doing was launching an attack on the American housewife. And it's quite sad as well. Like, I know Camille Paglia was really critical of her because Friedan was part of, you know, she and Steinam were Marxists, really. And, you know, as you rightly identified in your book as well, feminism is really a form of Marxism. It's a branch of Marxism that effectively turns the role of the male and female into the oppressed and the oppressor. And it's such an evil thing to do. I really think feminism is pure evil. But I think what's the saddest thing of all is how so many people don't understand feminism and don't understand how disgusting feminism is. They think feminism is equality. They think feminism is female independence. And the worst part is that all throughout human history, women have been able to work. They've been able to have jobs. You know, there are women who worked in farms, who worked in fields. I was on a live stream a few weeks ago, and somebody was saying to me how he doesn't think American women would like the idea of returning to traditional values because a lot of them work on farms. And I wanted to slap my head against my forehead. And I said, traditional values or traditional womanhood doesn't mean that a woman can't have a career. It simply means that a woman is feminine, that a woman respects being a feminine woman. That's it. It has nothing to do with a woman can't have a career. Like, many married women have careers. I always bring up the same examples. I bring up Thatcher, who you quoted in your book. I bring up Marie Curie. I bring up, all these great female artists like Frida Kahlo. A lot of these women were married. Like, it's terrible. I don't think people understand the irony of this. Like, there's so many women. There's quite a well-known American anti-feminist, she's very, very conservative, but her name is Suzanne Venker, and she's the niece of Phyllis Schlafly, who spoke out against the Equal Rights Amendment in the 1970s. And again, Ms. Venker she's like written a whole bunch of books. Again, she's very, very, very right wing, very American right wing, supports like Rush Limbaugh and whatever, which I don't really agree with. Fine, but she the point is that she's a woman who has a career, a successful online business, YouTube channel, podcast, writes books, and she's got a husband and children. So it's not to say, like, I don't think that modern women see the irony in that, how a lot of the women who are protesting against feminism, many of them have careers, many of them work. You even mentioned as well, like, you were talking about the vote and how it was women who were lobbying against the vote because women already were in charge of family life. They were in charge of the private sector. Women already had a position in society. And it's the same thing time and time again, week after week. They'll come, the feminists will come to me and they'll say, what about voting? And I'm like, girls, it was women who were against women voting. And it wasn't because they didn't want democracy. It was because women already had a function. And it's like, they're so brainwashed because they think, oh, women couldn't vote, that means they were being oppressed. And they never stop and think, well, what about the men who were being sent out to war? Who was more oppressed in 1917, the woman who couldn't vote, or the man who was sent to the trenches to have his guts ripped out?
That man also couldn't vote. 5 million men in the UK in 1917 couldn't vote because they didn't own property. It changed at the end of 1918. So feminists complain that women couldn't vote, but most men couldn't vote at the same time. Everybody was treated unfairly. Everybody was treated unequally, apart from a very small of the elite. Everybody's had it bad throughout the whole of history, but then we started changing a couple of 100 years ago, and women did without the vote for 10 years more than men did. That's a lag, was 10 years, 1 decade, and then women caught up.
Absolutely. And you said as well how women could vote in local elections. The same went for in Canada and in the US as well. And I think that a lot of people, they're missing the point as well. It's like the society, because who is it? Simon Webb, his book in The Suffragette Bombers, he talks about how in this kind of the turn of the, the 1900s or the 20th century, the British political system was shifting and there were a lot more priorities. People were concerned about the threat of war. There were a lot more things that people were concerned about. Women voting just wasn't a huge concern for the British political system. And it's as if feminists have turned this issue of women voting into this huge big deal. The same as with abortion as well. I mean, I'd be interested because I know you mentioned abortion, and it's funny because my view on abortion is actually like, I view abortion as, I think to make it completely illegal would be dangerous purely because in cases where a woman, say, her life is in danger or she's been raped or something. But the problem I have with the feminist view on abortion is they celebrate abortion. And I think abortion should really only be a last resort. I think it should be legal, but not seen as something we support or champion. It should be seen as like, okay, in a very, very, very immediate last resort, if a woman, yes, let's say she's in danger. Yes, let's say there's an issue. Yes, but the problem as well is that feminists don't really seem to want to address the root cause of why would women have abortions in the first place. Like, a lot of the women who have abortions are poor, they're on low incomes, they're women who can't afford to have the baby, and they never really care about that. It's like they don't care about women from impoverished backgrounds at all. It's like, oh, she can just get rid of it. But it's like, if she came from a stable background, if she had a stable husband who could provide for her, then she wouldn't be getting rid of the child. So that's the issue that feminists don't really seem to care about. And I'd like to hear what you have to say about that as well.
Yeah, the stats I've seen say that you're more likely to have an abortion if you're middle class rather than poor working class. But what really upsets me about the new feminist movement is many women I speak to now are quite happy aborting babies 1 hour before it's born. Now, abortion is extremely complicated. and I can understand aborting a baby if the mother's life's at risk. And this is life. Life is nuanced. Life is making difficult choices where there is no good choices to be made. So I understand how difficult abortion can be. But if you're telling me it's a woman's right to abort a baby 1 hour before the baby's born, then that's horrendous. And the women who celebrate this now, there's t-shirts you can buy. I've had 27 abortions for a t-shirt, and it's like, it's nothing to celebrate.
No, I think that's pure evil. I remember last year, actually, at the Battle of Ideas in London, I went to a panel about abortion, and there was some lesbian feminist woman talking about how, oh, women should be able to have abortions up until the third trimester, which is basically what you were saying. And it's really sick. It's really disgusting. I mean, the way I see it, it's completely ungodly. It's completely going against. I'm not religious, by the way. I'm spiritual, but yeah, you know, for me, it's completely going against, you know, effectively the spiritual significance of life. And I think that's so dangerous as well. It's like these feminist women, they don't care, they don't value life. And I think I also think pro-choice and pro-life are such terrible choice of terms. Like somebody I engaged with a while back, an Australian fellow, he used the term pro-responsibility. And I think that's really what is the best thing. It's that it should be about taking responsibility. Because a lot of women, they'll say, oh, why should I have to have this responsibility? Well, your body as a woman is made to bear children. And what I think is so messed up is that in the UK, there's a lot of contraception. Now, yes, the pill does have its negative side effects, but a lot of people don't talk about the coil. Like there's two types of coils, and I've actually been on the coil for several years. And, you know, for me, the coil is fantastic because, you know, it goes into your body and it doesn't have the same negative effects as the pill. A lot of women who come off the coil, they're able to conceive very easily. And so I don't see, why don't we talk about that? Like the coil, the way I see it is pretty fantastic. And there's implants as well. There's also obviously condoms. Like there's plenty of ways that women can, you know, for example, as I understand as well, a lot of women say if they're in their early 20s, maybe they want to focus on their education, maybe they want to focus on their studying, maybe they just don't want to have a child yet, maybe they just got married, they just want to be with their man before they start a family. You know, there's nothing wrong with contraception. But I think the issue as well is that women, it's as if women, you know, they want to use abortion as a form of birth control. And, you know, the whole point of birth control, well, because there is a dark side to it as well, but I think the positive side of birth control was really supposed to be about, you know, if you're in a relationship, you want to focus on, say, education, or if you've had 3 or 4 kids and you don't want any more, like, that's really what I think the function of contraception should be, as opposed to saying, okay, now we can just, you know, treat sex like it doesn't mean anything, which is a big problem for my generation. Or I suppose, again, women thinking, oh, let's just use if I can just have abortion, I can have 8 abortions. It's just horrible. And this all goes to a lack of female responsibility. There's an English feminist named Louise Perry who published a book last year called The Case Against Sexual Revolution. And one of the thing is, she said the things I agreed with, but what I really did not like at all, which I find a big problem with these feminists, is she didn't hold women to responsibility once. Because I read the book and she seemed quite happy to blame it all on men. It was a very common thing. It's like, I read the section when she was talking about women regretting casual sex, and I was thinking to myself, well, why doesn't she say to the women, look, if you had a casual sex encounter and you regret it, why don't you stop doing it? Like, I think it's more empowering to say to women, you can actually, like, you don't have to behave in this way. You can, you know, choose to, say, be in a relationship. That's more empowering, telling women that they can actually take control of their sexual choices rather than making women feel like victims. And I think that's what's so horrible about feminism and about liberalism as well. It wants to turn women into victims. It doesn't want to turn around and say to women, hey, you know, you have agency, you can decide. Because also, like, let's not be stupid here. Women, you know, most of the time, women, you decided to have sex with that man. It's not a good or bad thing. It was your decision. And instead of, you know, because also, like, feminists, they act like women are always being sexually coerced or raped, and actually it's not anywhere near as common as, you know, most men are not like that. I mean, very, 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 very few men genuinely treat women like that. And it's horrible because women who have actually been in those situations feel afraid to talk about it, because now you've got, you know, so many feminists making false accusations that women who have been actually sexually abused or coerced don't feel like they can talk about it, and it just does them a horrible disservice. So, you know, feminists, they've really made it hard, not only for men, they've made it hard for women as well. It's a truly terrible movement. It's a terrible ideology. I just hope it dies out soon.
And as I talk about in the book, we've had rampant feminism now in the UK for at least 70 years. All our policies that every government is initiated has all been feminist based. And every decade we ask women, how happy are you? And since the 60s, the 50s or 60s in the UK, women report being more and more unhappy every decade. But we're getting more and more feminist policies. So it's obvious the more feminist policies we have in society, the more unhappy women become, because it's destroying them. They can't see what's happening, but it's destroying them.
No, they can't, and it's really, really horrible. And I think that ultimately what feminism really is, it's a form of propaganda. And it really is such an evil thing, you know. It's effectively the biggest thing I really say is that feminism, because a lot of, you know, people ask me, why is feminism trash? And I usually say, well, because it drives men and women apart. Ultimately, that's what it does. It turns men and women against each other, and it's destroying social relationships. And, you know, it's horrible because I think it's so sad. I think a lot of, you know, young anti-feminist women, they don't really want to treat, you know, they don't really have any compassion. They don't want to actually help women. They don't want to, like, try and help women, you know, find more positive ways of looking at themselves. It's like a lot of them use, you know, like a lot of these so-called anti-feminist women, they just want to kind of put women down and stick on other women. And they're just as bad as the feminists, really. And this is all what happens, you know, when you give women too much power in society, they will abuse that power. They will gang up on other women, and they will gang up on men. And that's why effectively what we live in is a gynocracy. We don't live in a patriarchy. What we live in is a gynocracy. I wouldn't say we live in a matriarchy, because we do, most political positions are held by men, but yes, we live in a gynocracy because, as you rightly said, the policies that are being pushed forward in the West are feminist based policies. And these policies, like, you know, men losing out in divorce courts, men losing out in child custody rights, men losing this, men losing that, men losing this, and nobody benefits from this apart from, rightly said, the elites, because it's all about a plot to pit women, men against each other, to put women down, to destroy families, to destroy children, and to just make people hate each other and keep people in a state of fighting, rather than having people, you know, coming together, loving God, having families, being with their partners, being with their friends and their communities. And that's the world that we should really be striving to create, really.
I think that's a great place to end. I agree with every word you said then. Men and women are not each other's enemies. Men and women are partners. And it's only by partnering up can we face the evil, the dangers of the world, and try to gain a reasonable life together and have children. Life's hard. Life will always be hard. But it's only coming together and working together as a team can we ever hope to achieve success and an array of some type of happiness.
Thank you so much, Nick. And yes, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Well, thank you very much. Let's keep in contact. I'll put your contact details in the description of this video. And if you're watching this, go check out her YouTube channel and subscribe, and some good videos on there. Thank you, and I'll catch you soon.